Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up because what you are about to hear is the full, unfiltered blow-by-blow of the single most explosive television moment of the decade when Louisiana Senator John Kennedy walked onto the set of The View and absolutely obliterated Joy Behar in a live, on-air showdown that left the studio in stunned silence and the internet on fire for weeks. It all started innocently enough on a Tuesday morning when the producers of The View, desperate for ratings after a string of lackluster episodes, decided to invite the sharp-tongued Republican senator to discuss border security, inflation, and the upcoming midterm fallout. The audience clapped politely as Kennedy, dressed in his signature navy suit and red tie, took his seat with that trademark half-smile that says he already knows exactly how this is going to go. Whoopi Goldberg opened with a neutral question about immigration policy, but everyone in the room knew the real fireworks would come from Joy Behar, who had been openly trashing Kennedy for months, calling him everything from a cartoon character to the court jester of the Senate. The second the topic turned to the border, Joy leaned forward like a predator, eyes narrowed, and launched her first missile. "Senator, with all due respect, your party has spent years fear-mongering about immigrants while doing absolutely nothing to fix the problem. Isn't this just racist dog whistling dressed up as policy?" The audience erupted in applause for Joy, thinking they had him cornered right out of the gate, but Kennedy just tilted his head, let the clapping die down, and drawled in that thick Louisiana accent, "Joy, bless your heart, I didn't realize we were playing Jeopardy and the category was a things Joy Behar made up in her head." A ripple of nervous laughter swept through the crowd because they could already sense the temperature in the room shifting. Joy tried to interrupt, but Kennedy held up one finger, calm as Sunday morning, and continued, "Let me explain something to you real slow so even a New York liberal can follow. We had a secure border for 4 years under President Trump, then your party opened it up like a Walmart on Black Friday. And now we've got 10 million people who walked in without so much as a hello. That's not fear-mongering, darlin', that's arithmetic." The audience went dead quiet. Even Whoopi's jaw dropped a little because nobody talks to Joy Behar like that on her own show in Lives to tell the tale. But Kennedy was just getting warmed up. Joy's face turned the exact shade of her trademark red blazer as she tried to regain control, slamming her palm on the table and shouting over the stunned murmurs, "You can't just come on national television and insult half the country by calling immigrants criminals." Kennedy didn't even blink. He just leaned back in his chair like a man enjoying a glass of sweet tea on the porch and replied, "Joy, I didn't call all immigrants criminals. I said the ones your administration flew in at 3 in the morning on secret flights might raise a few questions. Now if the shoe fits, feel free to lace that bad boy up and wear it proudly." The audience let out an audible gasp because Kennedy had just dropped the infamous secret migrant flights receipts that the White House had been desperately trying to downplay for months. Sunny Hostin jumped in trying to save her co-host, reading statistics from some left-leaning think tank, but Kennedy cut her off with a polite smile and said, "Sunny, honey, I appreciate the effort, but those numbers are more cooked than a Thanksgiving turkey at Paula Deen's house." Laughter exploded from the conservative half of the audience while the liberal side sat there shell-shocked. Joy, now practically vibrating with rage, decided to go personal. "You sit there with your fake folksy act pretending to be some country lawyer when we all know you went to Vanderbilt and Oxford. Drop the phony accent. It's insulting." The studio went ice cold because attacking a Southern man's accent is the equivalent of insulting his mama, and Kennedy's eyes actually sparkled with pure delight, like a cat that just spotted a laser pointer. He leaned into the microphone and said, "Joy, I'll tell you what's phony, acting like you're a champion of the working class while you live in a Manhattan penthouse that costs more than the annual salary of every viewer watching this show right now. My accent is as real as your hair color is fake, sweetheart." The audience lost it completely. Half were screaming in outrage, half were howling with laughter, and the producers were frantically flashing the commercial break sign. But Kennedy wasn't done yet. He turned directly to the camera and said, "Folks at home, this is what happens when you let people who couldn't run a lemonade stand tell you how to run the country." Joy looked like she was about to spontaneously combust. When they finally came back from break, Joy tried to reset by pretending the first segment never happened, smiling through gritted teeth and saying, "Moving on, Senator, let's talk about women's rights," which everyone knew was code for abortion because that's the trap they always set for Republicans. She started reading from a prepared card about bodily autonomy and forced birth, but Kennedy just listened politely until she finished her monologue, then said, "Joy, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The same party that tells you a man can get pregnant is now lecturing me about biology. That's rich." The studio audience actually booed, but Kennedy just shrugged and kept going. "You all want to talk about women's rights? Let's talk about the women being raped and murdered by illegal immigrants your policies let in. Let's talk about the little girls trafficked across that open border while you sit here clutching your pearls over Mississippi law." Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to jump in with some moderate talking point, but Kennedy turned to her and said, "Alyssa, darling, with all due respect, you worked for Trump and then ran to CNN the minute the check cleared, so maybe sit this one out." The crowd roared because nobody expected him to go after the token conservative too. Joy, now completely unhinged, started yelling over everyone, "You are a misogynist. You are a danger to democracy." Kennedy just chuckled and replied, "Joy, the only danger to democracy I see right now is a woman who's been on television for 30 years and still hasn't figured out how to be likable." The audience reaction was pure chaos. Some women were standing up screaming at Kennedy, others were standing up cheering for him, and the security guards were visibly nervous. Whoopi tried to call for another break, but Kennedy held up his hand and said, "No, ma'am, we're gonna finish the stance." He then looked straight at Joy and delivered the line that would be clipped, shared, and mummed a billion times in the next 48 hours. "Joy, you've spent years calling half the country deplorable, racist, and garbage, but the second somebody pushes back, you cry like a toddler who dropped his ice cream cone. Grow up." You could have heard a pin drop in that studio. Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, and for the first time in her career, she had absolutely nothing to say. The tension was so thick you could have cut it with a chainsaw, and the producers were in full panic mode, flashing the wrap-it-up light like a disco, but Kennedy was on a roll and the audience was eating it up. Joy tried one last desperate Hail Mary, pulling out the January 6th card. "How can you sit here defending a man who tried to overthrow an election?" Kennedy just smiled and said, "Joy, the only people who tried to overthrow anything are the ones who spent 4 years screaming a Russia collusion while ignoring Hunter Biden's laptop because it didn't fit the narrative you wanted to sell. Now that's what I call an insurrection against the truth." The conservative half of the audience jumped to their feet cheering while the liberal half started booing so loud the microphones were picking up feedback. Sarah Haynes tried to play peacemaker, saying, "Okay, let's all take a breath," but Kennedy turned to her and said, "Sarah, honey, the only breath anybody needs to take is the one you take before you apologize for comparing concerned parents at school boards to domestic terrorists." Another direct hit. Joy was now literally shaking, pointing her finger at Kennedy and screaming, "You are a disgrace to the Senate." Kennedy just looked at her with pure pity and said, "Joy, I may be a lot of things, but at least I'm not a bitter, washed-up comedian who has to scream at guests to stay relevant. Bless your heart." That was the moment the entire set lost control. Even the stagehands were laughing. Whoopi finally stood up and said, "We're going to commercial," but Kennedy stood up first, took off his microphone, looked directly at Joy and said, "Joy, thank you for proving everything I've ever said about the intolerant left. You just did it live on national television for the whole country to see." He shook Whoopi's hand, waved to the audience, and walked off the set while half the crowd gave him a standing ovation and the other half sat there shell-shocked. Joy tried to recover by saying, "Well, that was unpleasant," but her voice was trembling and everyone could tell she had just been absolutely demolished. The clip of Kennedy's walk-off went viral within minutes, racking up tens of millions of views and becoming the #1 trending topic worldwide. As the show cut to commercial, the backstage chaos was reportedly insane. Staff members said they had never seen Joy that rattled in 30 years on television. She allegedly stormed off to her dressing room and refused to come out for the rest of the taping, forcing the show to air a pre-recorded segment instead of going live for the final block. Social media exploded immediately with #Kennedy destroys Behar trending higher than any political topic had in years. Conservative commentators called it the greatest live television takedown since Reagan said "there you go again," while liberal outlets desperately tried to spin it as Kennedy being rude and unhinged. But the clip spoke for itself. Every time Joy tried to bully him, he responded with facts wrapped in razor-sharp wit that left her speechless. Late-night hosts avoided the topic entirely because there was no way to make Kennedy look bad when the video was right there for everyone to see. Even some liberal viewers admitted in private messages and anonymous posts that they were embarrassed by how Joy conducted herself. The ratings for that episode of The View were the highest in 7 years, proving once again that people will tune in when there's real fire instead of the usual scripted talking points. Kennedy, for his part, went straight from the studio to a waiting car and did a live phone interview with Fox News where he simply said, "I came to talk about the issues facing real Americans, but they wanted a circus, so I gave them one." The next day he was back in the Senate giving speeches while Joy Behar took a sudden personal day and didn't appear on the show for the rest of the week. Clips of the confrontation were played on loop across every network, and merchandise with Kennedy's best lines started selling out within hours. Democratic strategists held emergency meetings trying to figure out how to counter the narrative because the viral moment had shifted public perception overnight. Suddenly millions of independents who had never paid attention to John Kennedy before were looking him up and liking what they saw. The View tried to invite him back a month later with a groveling email, but Kennedy's office responded with a single sentence: "Senator Kennedy has a prior commitment to common sense that day." The whole country was talking about it, and the phrase "bless your heart" took on a whole new meaning in American pop culture. In the weeks that followed, the fallout continued to grow. ABC executives reportedly had a serious conversation with Joy about toning down the hostility because sponsors were nervous about alienating half the country. Joy went on a media tour claiming she was ambushed and that Kennedy was dangerous, but every time she opened her mouth, the clip of her getting verbally dismantled played right alongside it, making her look even worse. Kennedy, meanwhile, saw his approval numbers in Louisiana hit an all-time high and started getting invited to every major show that actually wanted real conversation instead of got the moments. The Showdown became the perfect example of what happens when the coastal elite media bubble collides with someone who refuses to play by their rules, and Kennedy didn't just win the argument, he won the cultural moment. Years from now, political science classes will show that clip to demonstrate how a single television appearance can shift the national conversation. Joy Behar learned the hard way that when you invite a Cajun to a knife fight, you better bring more than a plastic spoon, because John Kennedy didn't just shut her down, he shut down the entire narrative machine that's been running unchecked for far too long. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly how a mild-mannered senator from Louisiana walked into the lion's den of The View and walked out leaving nothing but scorched earth and a masterclass in how to handle bullies with nothing but the truth and a smile. If you haven't seen the full 23-minute exchange yet, go find it, because it is pure political gold and proof that sometimes the good guys really do win, and when they do, they win big. Thank you for watching this complete breakdown of the day John Kennedy didn't just appear on The View. He absolutely ended it.